Welcome, everyone, to the ICSS Sunday Morning Marxist Forum. My name is Alan Miller, and I'm a member of the program committee for ICSS Sunday Morning Sessions. We're based in Oakland, California, and the San Francisco Bay Area, USA. Our weekly programs are online via Zoom every Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time, and you can sign up at our website, icssmarks.org, icssmarks.org, to receive weekly email announcements for our Sunday sessions. You can also view videos of past presentations and send us a message using our contact form on our website. We want to call your attention to our donation icon on our homepage and on our donation page itself, where you can make a donation to support our programs. Excuse me. Just a quick announcement. Next week is going to be a holiday break. There'll be no session on December 28th. So happy holidays, everyone. But we won't be meeting next week. On January 4th, 2026, we're going to have a session. Speaker will be St. Mary's College of California political economy professor Jack Rasmus. We'll kick off the new year with a presentation on Trump's economy, year one, where we'll talk about the state of the US economy and what to expect for next year. If you want to be notified about future sessions, sign up for our mailing list at icssmarks.org. Today's session is going to be a group discussion. Whoops. Group discussion of the question, are we at a tipping point in world history? Are we at a tipping point in world history? The subject couldn't be more appropriate for our end of year session. We want to have a lively and productive discussion today, and in order to do so, we're going to start off with a brief introduction by our program committee member, Peter, to get the discussion going. And then following this, we're going to focus on the discussion of three important questions. Let me actually show these questions if you don't mind.
And if we do,
I'm still going to do it. And can somebody mute him? That's your official warning. Hold on.
Are you trying to share the screen or?
Yeah, I'm trying to share the screen. I'll get it. There we go. I'm sharing the screen, Mehmet. I'm not trying. Okay, everybody see it? Okay,
Right.
so we're going to talk about what we're going to do today is instead of having an open-ended discussion, we want to really focus it on three discussion questions. The first one is, what is the extent of the shift in geostrategic power that's taking place? In other words, is there a shift? What is the extent of the shift? What's going on? People can talk about things like, BRICS, de-dollarization, uh, really questions that are focused specifically on the events that are taking place that constitute this quote unquote tipping point that we're talking about. The second question we're going to discuss is, how should Marxists regard the change? In other words, what's the significance of the shift? How do we analyze it? And the third question is, what is the significance specifically for the US working class, for us in the US? What we're going to try to do is stick to each of these topics. I know that there's a lot of interrelationship and spilling over from one question to the next, but let's try to focus on each question to try and get more deeply into each of these topics that constitute the general topic that we're talking about today, which is the tipping point in history. Before we jump into today's session, just wanted to we'll make a quick announcement. Many of you might have heard that Victor Grossman, who appeared previously, the American German expatriate who resided in the GDR, the German Democratic Republic, and quote unquote East Germany, passed away at the age of 97 this week. Victor spoke at our um, at our Sunday morning session, once in person, I think in 2019, and once recently via Zoom, and had terrific discussion with him appearing. And Peter, why don't you have a quote I think you wanted to uh, mention about what about that from Victor. Why don't you go ahead and say it?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Um, so, yeah, I met Victor a couple of times out in Western Mass. Really fascinating perspective that he has on the development of GDR. Of course, he uh, defected as a soldier from the U.S. Army to GDR, swimming across the river to get to the GDR forces, and then became a citizen and wrote as a journalist for many years. And I just want to read kind of his view of the world. And this is really kind of epitomizes what he stood for and what his perspective. He says, quote, I look back at my 70 years as an expat and still consider myself a patriotic American, never for the USA of Morgan or Rockefeller, but for that of John Brown, Harriet Tubman, Eugene Debs, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, Du Bois, Robeson, Malcolm, and Martin. He says, I also loved and admire great Germans, Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, Karl Liebknecht, Rosa Luxemburg, and other writers like Lessing, Goethe, Heinrich Heine, and Thomas Mann, etc. And he says, I respect and empathize with people from all lands, my brothers and sisters from Guam to Guatemala and Gaza. I can only hope that new generations learn from the GDR, not only from its blunders, nasty habits, and limitations born of its history, and all too realistic fears of being overthrown. Despite my sometimes feelings in those years of despair, even anger, at mistaken paths or missed opportunities, I still look back with a mixture of nostalgia, regret, and also pride at its many hard-won achievements in culture, in living together, and overcoming the cult of greed and rivalry, in unflinching GDR support of the Mandelas, the Allende's, Ho Chi Minh, Angela Davis, etc., and not like its ultimately stronger and victorious opponents in Bonn for the Pinochets, Franco's, racist, and apartheid tyrants. I recall our achievements in avoiding war and striving for lives without fear or hatred. By and large, they were good years, and I'm glad I lived through them. So that was his view of the world, which was really fascinating. Again, a great loss. So,
Why
but
don't-
you know, yeah,
let's go ahead and once you stop the share, just let me say a few more words by way of introduction.
okay.
Okay, for you can actually view. We were fortunate enough to have videoed his in-person appearance at the Marxist Library in Oakland, and if somebody can drop the link to that and also the Zoom session that he had in the last time he appeared. The I watched the in-person presentation last night, and it's really very good. I really highly recommend it that people take a look at it. And I think that maybe we should do a session. It's actually quite relevant with the developments that are taking place in Europe today to do a session on the GDR and to talk about socialism in Eastern Europe and the GDR in particular. So I think we'll put something like that together. So thank you, Peter, for pulling that up. I think that was really a very touching and appropriate quote. Thank you very much. Okay, so again, what we're going to do today is we're going to have a group discussion on are we at a tipping point in world history? And we're going to do this a little bit differently today. Instead of it being just completely open-ended discussion, we want to focus it on these three questions that we that I put up a minute ago. What is the extent of the shift? How should Marxists regard the shift, and what's the significance of what's going on for the U.S. working class. Everyone is welcome to join in by expressing your thoughts and opinions or simply asking questions. So, in order to get started, what we're going to do is let's have Peter do a quick introduction, kind of frame the topic, and then we're going to shift into the first part of the discussion on what's actually going on today, sort of more the facts of the situation. So, Peter, why don't you go ahead?
Okay.
Thank you.
Let let me share my screen because I got a couple of interesting slides here as we discuss this. Okay. Um, so
There you go. Got it.
yeah. So here's my question to you, to the audience. If you were to summarize what has happened in the last year, and what does it mean? What are the international developments that have occurred, and what does it mean in the historical evolution of world politics and humanity? Um, I'm sure there are a couple of things you would pick out as representative of major occurrences in the past year, and I just want to highlight a few of those and let you decide what does this really mean. So if we look back over the past year, it's difficult and impossible not to see that we are living on the precipice of world-changing events. We're at a historic turning point in the balance of forces, the likes of which we really haven't seen in our lifetimes. And the reason I say that is because this is a change in the world position of the United States. All of our lifetimes, the United States has been a growing power and dominant power. Suddenly, it is a declining power. And this photo really represents something really important that occurred in the last year that often, the Western press virtually ignored this. Virtually said it didn't happen. We're not even going to talk about it. And this is the gathering of all Southern, well, I should say, including a few Western, but mostly Southern nations and Asian nations together to commemorate the end of World War II. Now, why did it happen in China? Well, China happened to lose 20 million people in the World War II. No one seems to remember that. But it was a massive, massive, battle and contribution to defeating Japanese imperialism. So represented here is not only China, but also, Putin and Russia, which lost 27 million people. Uh, presidents and representatives of North Korea, uh, all Asian nations, all of which had huge losses during World War II. What is reported, or what was covered in Western press, was not this, but uh, an interesting summarization of World War II by Kaya Kallas, who is the top foreign secretary of the European Union. And she described this event, and she said she was shocked to hear that the Russians and Chinese considered themselves to be the victors in World War II, that they had defeated Nazi Germany and Japan. And she was shocked by this. She said, people don't realize that, if you don't really study history, you don't understand. But this is a really shocking thing for the Russians and Chinese to claim that they actually defeated Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. So this is the way world changing events are relayed to the Western audience. Nonetheless, despite that, I think many of us, Marxists and others, see a really different world that's evolving, and that is a, a world balance where the geopolitical forces are tipping away from the old alignment. This alignment, which was kind of renegotiated in 1991 when the Soviet bloc was overthrown, the United States came up with a new unipolar hegemony. Now, what does this mean? What does a hegemony mean? And what does unipolar mean? Well, simply the reemergence of one single power in the world that dictates its political, military, and social view to the rest of the world and economic. And this was laid out with as many of us know, the Wolfowitz Doctrine, where he said basically, we will not allow any power throughout the whole world to become a challenge to us. And now this involved destroying Russia, destroying the Russian economy. Their main goal was to destroy it, break it up into 5 different blocks, and dominate all the different parts of the former Russia as little, federated groups of people that were no longer a threat to the United States. Uh, Needless to say, this didn't quite happen, although they were able to cause the, demise of a whole society by pulling out, by through financial intervention and funding oligarchs that basically destroyed and stole the entire assets of the whole country. And American investors and European investors came in and bought it all up, bought much of it up. Nonetheless, even Wolfowitz knew, and he foresaw this. He said this in the 1992 National Security Assessment that we don't have forever. We will not be able to dominate the world forever because other forces will be growing and they will grow. And so now is the time to dominate the world. And that is what the United States did, of course, and NATO did, starting with wars in Europe and in the Balkans, trying to dismantle Serbia, which they considered a threat to NATO power, and then on and on, expanding NATO into all of Central and Eastern Europe, as a military bloc, trying to defang what they believe would become a challenge to their power, and that is Russia, and likewise China. So, these, 3 different tranches of expansion of NATO. Each time these expansions were protested by Russia, who said, you promised repeatedly in 1992 when we agreed to the reunification of Germany, that if we agreed to this, which had set up a potential threat to us, you agreed that you would never expand NATO 1 inch west, 1 inch east towards Russia. And of course, once America basically became the unipolar hegemon, the feeling was we don't give a shit what anyone thinks. We're going to extend NATO throughout all of Europe and challenge Russia. So this is what happened. And of course, we know kind of the result. Many of the American diplomats with the longest and most deepest knowledge of Russian relations raised red flags. Everyone from Kennan to Kissinger to former CIA leaders and diplomats said that extending this threat towards Russia will inevitably lead to war. There was a red flag declaration that telling American leaders that this expansion of American hegemony will be seen in Russia as a red flag, and they will have no choice but to respond in a military way. So that kind of brings us to where we are today. We are now on our 3rd major war that we have lost, that NATO has lost. NATO lost in Afghanistan. It lost basically in many ways, to Iranian hegemony in Iraq, and it is now lost in Ukraine. And for those who really don't believe that the war has been lost, all you need to do is listen to colonels and a number of generals and CIA officers that have retired in the United States, and they will tell you precisely that the war is over. NATO has lost. The only question is what becomes of that lost war? Does it turn into military intervention by European troops or not? Does the confrontation and escalation grow? So, I just kind of want to bring this back to how we view these changes. Do we view them as a dramatic change that all of a sudden came about this past year or a few number of years? I don't think it is. I think it's really my view is these changes have been building, in my perspective, for decades. I think a lot of people know the quip by Ernest Hemingway and in his book, This Sun Also Rises, where one of his characters said, "How did you go bankrupt?" And the character said, "Two ways: gradually, then suddenly." These things happen gradually, piece by piece, bit by bit, until, as Hegel described them, the quantitative magnitude changes into a qualitative transformation. And this is what we're seeing. Since China's power and Russia's power have been going for 2 decades, and they've been preparing for this. And in some ways, you could say it's a similar preparation that Stalin warned about after the Nazis came to power. He said basically we had 10 years. We have 10 years to build ourselves up. And if we haven't done it by the end of 10 years, we'll be invaded, and Germany will destroy us. And certainly he wasn't the only one that said that, but certainly it kind of reminds us that these things can be foreseen. These changes can be foreseen sometime in the future, and therefore states have to take some kind of action to react to these growing, world changing events. So I think that kind of brings us to, those questions that were raised earlier, which was, to what extent have these changes happened? How significant are they? How world changing have they been? And then secondly, how should Marxists look at the change in balance of power? As a Marxist, what is your reaction? And then finally, how does this impact the working class? What is the significance? Does it matter at all? Does it really change the position in the class struggle in the United States? So, Alan, do you want to kind of open it up and kind of get a discussion going?
Unmute. Yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and if you'd stop the share, we'll continue. So again, what we're going to try to do today is to maybe focus the discussion around specific parts of the question. And you should regard what Peter just said as a perspective that he's put forward to kind of kick it off. And I think he did focus on the first question, which is what is the extent of the changes? Now, you can disagree with what he said. This is not we're presenting our view and you've got to agree with this. For example, you may think, well, how how um, how much has things changed? The dollar is still in place. The United States is going on a rampage right now in terms of attacking countries, Iran, uh, Palestine under attack, Venezuela under attack. is how solid is these blocks that have formed. So with that, what I'm going to ask people to do is raise your hand, and let's start with that question. I know it's hard to kind of keep things separate, but let's try to focus first on what's going on. And then we're going to jump into the second question, which I think everybody really wants to get into, which is the significance. So let's go ahead and see people. I'm going to call on people, and then later on, I'm going to open it all up. So Raj raised his hand. Uh, Others, go ahead and raise your hand. So Raj, why don't you go first, and then we'll get Laura.
Okay,
Let's
thank
try and
you,
keep it
Alan,
to
and thank you, Pete.
keep comments down to a few minutes because we want to give everybody a chance to participate. So go ahead, Raj.
Okay, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Alan. Um, I agree with Peter's perspective. This is a strategic shift. It is not a temporary shift. Um, and that photograph that you showed was interesting to see that Mao's suit was worn by Z, whereas North Korean leader who usually wears that kind of suit is actually in business suit, and so is Putin. And I think that's an indication. Also, in that picture, you will notice Modi is absent. So that indicates contradictions. Modi was there for the meeting before, which was the SEO meeting, the security meeting. But he left purposely because he didn't want to be part of this, which positions him differently. So I think this shift began when U.S. became a unipolar power for about 3 decades. Okay, during that period, it really ransacked all kinds of places, destroyed many countries, as you have noted, Peter, and resistance was bound to grow. And the other basis of that is Chinese economy has been growing. It has become the workshop of the world, but also Putin has put together the Russian system, and while it is not socialist, he had made use of socialist advance in military and other productions to be a very substantial power. In fact, so Russia is presently in strategic weapons is ahead of the West. So so those two are clearly the new poles of power. One military, the other economic. Not that China is not a military power, but it is not demonstrated military power as of now. And the third one is India. So India is the weaker of these two, and it also has contradictions with China. But the geostrategic shift that we are seeing is definite. The United States is right now not only involved in Venezuela, but has been involved in change of government in Bangladesh, which actually concerns India. Bangladesh is immediately next to India, and there is a potential rise of Islamic regime there, which India would not like. Not that it is orchestrated by the United States, but U.S. is still meddling in Bangladesh and in Venezuela. It's threatening to overthrow Maduro government. So, as of now, the balance of power still favors the United States in the Western Hemisphere, but in the eastern part, the United States is not in a good position. So I agree, this shift is going up. But on the other hand, the United States remains a very powerful country. And I
Okay,
think I'll
so
stop here.
that's about 4 or 5 minutes there. So Raj brought up some interesting points. I mean, he's talking about the fact that there's an unevenness, there are contradictions. Also, he said that some people say the U.S. is done, is finished. Is that true? Raj was saying, well, it's not finished, still pretty strong. But so we really want people to comment on these types of questions. So Laura, why don't you go ahead? followed by Richard. So Richard F. So go ahead, Laura, please unmute. You have to, I don't know, our back end tech person. Uh,
Go
yeah,
ahead, do it now. Yeah,
you
you
can
can
do it.
unmute. You can unmute.
Okay, I couldn't for a minute there. So the way that the US is losing power, the way it strikes me is that it's like a dragon that's dying and its tail is thrashing uh, out at whatever it can reach. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that it's as if to retain as much dominance and power, the US, that's one of the reasons that the US is focused on this hemisphere. It's like the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, and the Monroe Doctrine was 1810, where the US said to Europe, hands off this hemisphere. It's our hemisphere, our backyard. And so one of the things that the US is trying to do is to retain power, at least in this hemisphere. And one other interesting thing that Richard Wolff, the Marxist professor, recently said that I found interesting was that he figured at some point both the EU, Europe, and the US will align with China economically, and Europe doesn't have a chance to compete with the US doing that. And so that is one of the ways that he saw that the power dynamics would change, that the US would actually align economically with China. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Next is Richard F., followed by Lucy. So, Richard, please go ahead. Unmute.
Yeah, I agree that there is a shift. I agree with Raj that both China has achieved a certain primacy economically, and Russia has achieved a primacy militarily. But I think you have to go further that they could only achieve that through their system. They have a more advanced social system than the capitalist countries. They have what we used to call socialism, and we don't call it socialism now. We call it sort of multipolarity or something. China, they still call it socialism. Russia, they don't call it socialism. They call it something else. But, it's basically socialism, and it's a more advanced social system. And that's the only way they could achieve that primacy. I agree that European capital is dead. The capitalist class is kaput. And it's same with the United States. And, Trump thinks he can recover the U.S. capital in some way. I don't believe. I don't. It's an irreversible decline, and the domination of the socialist system is becoming manifest, and it's going to become around the whole world. Of course, there will be struggles, and it'll be the transition in every country will be a little bit difficult, but it'll happen. And even I think one of the lessons that capital in the global South will realize is that its only chance for survival, even for a limited period, is to support socialism, because in the countries where the capitalist countries, the advanced capitalist countries, are done for. There is no way the European economy can recover. There's no way the European military can recover. And I think that's also true of the United States. And, this is a lesson that's going to sink in with the whole world population. So it is a titanic shift, system-wise, not national-wise. It's system-wise, it's class-wise, and I think that's, as Marxists, we have to recognize that.
Okay, we're kind of spilling a bit into the next part, but that's still good. It's really focused on the question. Lucy, why don't you go ahead, followed by Mehmet. We'll take a few more on this, and then maybe we'll move on to part two, which I think is going to be the part that's going to be the
Richard Wright
longest.
was on the queue, right?
I'm going to call on people. Why don't you go ahead, Lucy?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The thing I see is that the world appears to be focusing on lining up. And you see countries in Latin America uh, either on the side of the US or on the side of China, but they may not be openly China, but it's obviously putting up a big struggle against the US. The US fight in Venezuela is a fight against China, in my opinion. So there is a lining up of the BRICS countries versus the U.S. empire. And I do believe that it is crumbling. I think it is will be one of those sudden changes, one of those breaking changes that occurs after a sequence of many changes that don't show much change. They're accumulated and then suddenly a burst. And that could be a war. And I worry about Latin America because Mexico, for instance, is tied up with the US economically. Although it does say that it is fighting, it's against the US attempting to destroy Latin America's sovereignty. But Mexico has taken a position of putting up tariffs on China, Chinese goods. China had offered to open up a plant in Mexico, the BYD plant, a couple of years ago, and they were forced to stop because the U.S. was intruding heavily in Mexico and pressuring Sheinbaum to step away from China. And so many countries are going to face that kind of stuff, that kind of pressure. And Venezuela is particularly at the forefront. And it worries me that there isn't yet any big front against those attacks in Latin America. There, you see Colombia and maybe Brazil and Mexico possibly. Then you have, of course, Cuba and Nicaragua defending Venezuela very strongly, but the other countries are not. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I think in terms of what well, I'll leave it like that because I do agree that there is a very sudden change coming, and it's going to be monumental. But what comes out of it, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay, so next is Mehmet, followed by Richard Wright. So Mehmet, please go ahead. And let's try to focus. We're going to shift over to significance in a moment, but let's try to stay on what's going on and how the extent, in a sense, the facts of the situation. So go ahead, Mehmet.
Yeah, hi. Are we begging to find some kind of a success somewhere that we are like hedging our bets for some capitalist imperialist rivalries.
Wait, Mehmet, let's try to focus on the extent of the shift. That I think what you're addressing is the next part of the discussion, which is,
Okay.
and I'll call on you first, the next part.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I don't. There is a big shift happening, but it's not what I'm hearing here.
okay.
My approach is that yes, there's a big shift. What is that the imperialist class is truly becoming international. What is eroding are the nation states of imperialism, while the imperialist class, the finance capital class, the top capitalists from Uganda to Mexico to China to you name it, United States to Canada joining. There is a huge amount of top capitalists renouncing their US citizenship because of this, because of that. But nation states don't mean anything to them. So the shift is significant, yes. Shift is that the capitalists are joining together against the entire world, including the working class of United States, Canada, you name it, other countries. So shift is happening. It is big, but not in the sense that, Russia and China are against United. Russia did not want to leave the pact. China did not want to leave the pact. They made all kinds of concessions, but they were kicked out. There's a big difference, huge difference. If China had walked away, saying that, guys, you do your thing, I'm doing mine. Thank you. Don't call me. If Russia had done the same, I would have said, yeah, there's a big shift happening. But no, they did not. They begged on their bended knees to be included in the dinner table. But those sitting at the dinner table kicked them out, and they are still making concessions. So this is not a shift of new countries breaking the bloc. It is a shift where those people who believe that they belong to the table are not allowed anymore to sit at the table. So anyway, I'll leave it here, but
Okay.
We'll continue more. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that's a comment really on the second part of the discussion. We should hold that for a moment and let people finish up with comments related to the extent of the shift. And we'll come back to that because I think that is some of the key questions that are going on. So Richard Wright, followed by Janet and then Jean. So Richard, please go ahead.
Yep, thank you. And I apologize for my ugly face not being in the. Maybe it's better that way. I wanted to take a little bit of a umbrage, if you will, with Peter's thesis. Umbrage in the sense that, to me, it seems to reflect a historic black and white analysis of geopolitical power. That is to say that it reflects the historic divide between the U.S. and Russia and China. And I'm thinking that this analysis maybe in the offing of being changed. And first off, as I mentioned in the chat, it leaves out Iran, which was really one of the first, if not the first, countries subject to U.S. and British covert operations, very cheap covert operations, and lately, of course, the target of a number of missiles. But the other thing is that it seems to me that it ignores another historic geopolitical power that we don't really usually think of, and that is Latin America. Um, as if I'm not, if my history is not mistaken, I believe that Mexico was one of the first, if not the first, socialist states uh, in the country, in the world.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
again, I want to try to urge people, we want to try to keep this. I think we'll let up at this in a moment because people are just spilling over into the second part. What I'm going to ask, a bunch of people have your hands up. Does anybody want to make a final comment on the
Can I just
question of the extent of what's going on? Then we can shift into the significance and the meaning. Janet, why don't you go ahead?
Alan, can I just finish up my comment
Well,
real
you
quick?
can, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Just real
Go-
quick.
yeah,
The other polarity in this issue that we've ignored is Africa. And I'll finish up with that. There's a multinational polarity developing that we need to consider.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Janet, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. So I think it's more of an increase in the polarization of geostrategic power rather than a shift, including the US empire leaning towards 19th century colonialism and all the violence that goes with it. Perhaps it's the thrashing of the dragon's tail, as Laura referred to. And aside from the Donroe doctrine, there are major shifts in West Asia, and has been no mention of the shifts taking place in Europe and growing fascism. Now, based on the adoption on November 17th of the UN Security Resolution 2803, with the Arab and Gulf states and other states on the UN Security Council voting in favor of it, and Russia and China caving, they literally handed Gaza to Trump. He owns Gaza in the form of colonialism going back. Oh, well, and Israel is beyond impunity. So it's broader than what has been talked about so far, in my opinion. I'll
Okay.
stop there.
Anybody else want to make a quick comments on this first part of it, or we can shift over? Anybody else want to speak up on that?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead, Peter. You can wrap that up. Go ahead.
Um, it actually is a good discussion, but I want to just kind of give you a quick look at, a graphical look at what this transition looks like, and I'm going to show you a slide if you don't mind. Um, this is, hopefully you can see it. This is the change in the percentage of world GDP between the blue, which is advanced economies, and the orange, which are developing economies. So clearly you can see that this is the real shift happened right around 2010 or so, where, if you can agglomerate southern or developing countries into one group, and that is when they became became superior to the advanced economies. So, okay, that's interesting, but what does it mean? Does it mean that the United States is kaput, as has been mentioned, that, these other powers now rule the world? Of course not. This is a breakdown of the world economies, and you'll see red meaning kind of the BRICS countries. And by the way, in the red section here, what's missing is Iran, which has even about the same GDP as South Africa, this tiny, tiny little bit down the bottom left. That's about the size of Iran. So, the red section are the rising powers. The purple are also semi-aligned with the red powers. They're often southern powers that are growing in influence in their economies only, we're talking. But the US is almost a $30 trillion economy. That's not going away. I hate to say it. Germany is 6 trillion. Uh, Russia is now the fourth largest economy in the world. Now let that sink in. What, Obama and others, derided as a gas station with snow. Russia is now the fourth largest economy in the world. So this kind of gives you the, what has really changed? What has happened? And this is, a look at kind of domestically how this plays out in the United States, how we're using federal spending to try and patch together our international hegemony through debt, the red spending above, and the revenues are below, which leads us to this
Okay,
massive.
so let's
All I'm trying to do is give a
okay.
basis for switching to how is this affecting the
Yeah,
United.
we'll actually get into that.
Nothing
I
wrong
think
today.
pertains. I'm sorry if I'm being a little heavy-handed here. I'm trying to really keep it focused. Any last comments on this question, Dave? Do you want to go ahead? You on that particular question of the extent of the shift? You have to unmute. Dave, go ahead.
I'm
Unmute.
sorry. Yeah. Um, Very short, just at a very macro level, I want to say that the bottom line for the capitalist mode of production is how much of the surplus produced by the workers can be expropriated by the
Appropriate.
capitalists. And during the imperialist era, the imperialist countries were expropriating massive amount of surplus produced in the colonies. After the colonial period ended, and like India and China, their progress started only after in 1950s, and it has taken about 70 years to develop their own capitalist mode of production and productive forces. Now the fight, I think, is these coming up countries with a capitalist mode of production. They don't want imperialist countries to keep extracting all that big share of surplus produced by the countries of the South, and so they are fighting the imperialist countries. So that's why the fight is, and they want to, the local capitalists, they want to develop their own mode of production and own productive forces, and to progress forward. And so I think this is why we are seeing now why the global South is, after 70 years, they have come up to a level where now they can face up to the imperialist countries, and they are still marching forward. Their graph is going upward, whereas the imperialists are going downward. So where the current things are today are not going to be there 20 years from now. So that's my comment.
Okay. All right. So let's shift into the second
Can
part
I
of the
say something?
discussion. Who is that speaking?
And yeah, I would like to say something about this
Yeah,
shift.
go ahead. Go ahead
Okay,
on this
thank you.
particular.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have two things to say, really. One is that I agree that this is with Peter, that it's been quantitative development over at least a couple of decades. And but it's really accelerated in the last 3 years. And that is since the Russian Federation lived up to its internationalist duty and intervened on behalf and in support of the laboring and toiling peoples of eastern and southern Ukraine in their struggle against the extreme reactionary, chauvinistic, and imperialist regime in Kiev that was oppressing them and and killing them, frankly. I mean, so the People's War of the peoples of eastern and southern Ukraine actually stimulated all of the other activity in the world, and people in the other parts of the world will say it. So, for instance, in Burkina Faso, they're now the revolutionary regime in Burkina Faso has adopted Soviet-style agricultural policies. They're utilizing what used to be the machine practice stations in the Soviet Union are being used, or a form like that at least is being used in Burkina Faso to advance their agriculture. And that isn't, not to mention that they're actually the people in the AES countries, the former West African countries of the Sahel, have thrown the French imperialists out and the U.S. imperialists out. In Chad, the people of Chad threw out the U.S. and they invited the Russian army to use the base there. So these things are, they're all little individual things, right? But they're inspired by, they're brought about by the masses of people. They're inspired by political leaders in other parts of the world, particularly President Xi and President Putin. So they're having an impact. And of course, President Xi and President Putin, well, at least the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation, created both the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS. And these two organizations internationally form a new thing. Now, I don't think we're at a tipping point, but we are certainly at an accelerated moment of, or an accelerated time period of new forms, revolutionary activity. And that has an implication for Marxists, because we have to grapple with the requirement of a theory of revolution. So I'll leave it there, and perhaps I can comment on the second part.
All right, good. Well, definitely we're going to come back. We have a couple of people who still want to make comments on the first question. So go ahead, Citizen One, and then Lieberknecht. So Citizen One, and then I'm going to push it to the second part because we're just chomping at the bits on that, and it's starting to get late. So go ahead, Citizen One.
Yes, so I hope my comments do fit in with this first part, but let me know if they need to be shifted to another part. So my question to the group, and especially to Laura Wells, is America First seems to be a restatement of the Wolfowitz doctrine. And I'm wondering how the Wolfowitz doctrine itself is any different from the Truman doctrine. So if Laura, anyone might want to respond to that, I appreciate it if they have time. So, what I've realized recently is that America First doesn't mean the American people, especially the American working class first, but the War Department doctrine as international ideology. It seems to be a renewed militarist, imperialist U.S. foreign policy with a renewed aggression. And I like the way Janet Coburn referred to it as the Don Rowe doctrine. And maybe I might amend that to mean the Don Rowe-Hegseth doctrine. So I'm wondering, how does going to war against Venezuela put the American people first? How does giving a right-wing leader in Argentina $20 billion putting the American people first? Why is Trump spending $20 billion to make Argentina great again? So I also wanted to say, and I'll conclude here, I appreciated Peter Fay's comments, and especially his graphs. With regard last week to the guest, Mary Cow, if I'm pronouncing her name right, who's commented on the Asian American activist movement in the 70s, she was very good. I really appreciated the comment. But she said, like many leftists do, that the empire is falling. And I would say, I think we'll know when the U.S. empire is falling if the U.S. has to start closing its 700 to 800 military bases and installations around the world. So I guess those will be my comments. I just realized lately that America first doesn't mean the American people first. And it's part of my expectation, perhaps others here, that Trump is going to be turning against the American working class. They certainly aren't going to
Let's
be
hold
first.
that for
Thank
let's
you.
hold that part for the last
Oh,
part.
okay.
Definitely.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Liebknecht, I think you've had your hand up pretty patiently for a while on this particular question. You want to make a last comment, then we'll shift over. Go ahead. There you
Now,
go.
now you hear me, now?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I want to speak. I agree from my point. Now we are in a way that first time after 500 years, the Western states lose their domination. And the special region is the economic power of China and naturally the military power of Russia. And but we have now a very big shift in our society, especially in Europe. We have this big push for armament, unbelievable high part of money they want to put in the army. So we should not believe that they want to give up. They will not give up. This we have to know. From my point, they risk the survival of mankind before they give up. We see it, this money, for example, in Germany, they want to put half of the budget now for the military. And that means the state which we had after 1945, the welfare state, can't be financed anymore. And they say it openly. Secondly, the democratic exchange in the society, they reduces. I don't know if you have heard, one of the big intellectuals is a former Swiss man, Jacques Beau. Now the European Union have said he can't have any account anymore. He can't travel in Europe. They go to very draconic measures they take to take the democratic field away. So this is a big change. Then what you have seen that they want to steal the Russian assets. That means also they try to bring the state of law down. And from my point is, their shift is they want something like a recolonization. You know, Europe always, West Europe always wanted to colonize Russia. And they still, in a fanatic way, even if they see that it will be very difficult, that they go this way. And I think, and the US, they speak often if you are here to Venezuela, more or less recolonization. So I think they will go in this way and they share power. But the Europe has to do Russia and then the US takes other countries off. So I think we have a very hard fight, but optimism is only we can be because the first time the forces on our side, the economic military forces on the opposite side of the West is stronger than ever before. And if the West continues, it's suicidal and for mankind. And I hope that we can convince the people that we need cooperation in this world to survive. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's open this up. To the second part, even though we've been talking about it for the last 15 or 20 minutes or so. I just want to make a quick comment to try to give a little bit of the landscape. In my view, there are three main perspectives on what is the significance of this for Marxists. The first one is a group that sees the changes that have taken place represent the rise of a competing capitalist bloc. And in some cases, or most cases, those who hold that view say that it's a rising imperialist bloc. So what we have is a contention between two competing capitalist blocs, something that is not of interest to the working class, that the working class should be pushing for socialism, and that this idea of multipolarity is a fake idea, and it runs counter to Lenin's teachings about imperialism. The kinds of groups that are putting this forward, the kinds of individuals, include groups like Paulette Stern, Progressive Labor Party. ML Today, Greg Godels has basically come out and polemicized and said that there is really nothing of significance in this multipolarity, except for perhaps an increasing threat of conflict. It's actually kind of come out a little bit today too. The second group are the people who say that this is a rising multipolarity represents the strategic pathway to human liberation, liberation of the working class and people. And the multipolarists basically say that this is the path that's presented to us, and this is the path that we need to take, and it's going to resolve the contradictions of unipolar power is the problem in the world today, and that when we have multiple centers of power in the future, which is what's developing, that's what's going to solve the world's problems. The third group is sort of the people who represent the second group might be the Geopolitical Economy Report, people like Brian Berletic, who's a military analyst. Ben Norton, I think, is one of the people who's sort of in the multipolarist camp. The third camp is kind of the people who say that multipolarity is a fact. It's the reality of what's emerging, and it represents a necessary and welcome step, but it doesn't represent a strategic path to liberation. That is socialism, but we can't ignore what's going on today, and we have to sort of get into this, get into the ring, and the working class has to assert its power in the struggle. And perhaps you could say that this is most represented by the Communist Party of Great Britain, CPG-BML, the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. Those are the three trends that I see. So let's go ahead and open it up. People have already started commenting. Raise your hand, or I don't even know. We could even open it up. Sharon, you can go ahead. Why don't you start?
Thank you. Thank you for framing the question so well, Alan, and Peter. I just have a couple of comments. One is that the communists who have come to power historically have done so after devastating wars, and have also maintained their power through devastating wars. And I'm talking about the Soviet Union and China, of course. And the American people have never, in all that time, suffered on our own soil the effects of any kind of war, except Vietnam. And I think one of the major changes that we need to include when we're looking at where we are now is the nature of warfare has changed. So the United States ruling class decided they could not continue the draft. So they figured they could do without it. They could still go to war without a draft because the technology was developing so fast. And then Jimmy Carter gave his inaugural address and turned away and signed the executive order of amnesty to the draft resistors and the deserters. And that was the end of that. They put that behind them. And now we have a situation where so much of, not all, of course, but so much of battles involve drones and remote controlled bombs and that kind of thing. And Lucy mentioned the threat of war in this hemisphere, and I think it's very real. And I think it's not with certainty that the American people will avoid having the war reach our own soil. And I think that has to be taken into account when we're looking at what's coming next or what they're planning. And
We can, why don't we go
let me
ahead? Why don't we
stop
go ahead
there.
and move on?
Let
Okay.
me stop there. I have other things, but let's.
Okay, but
Yeah.
we're going to open this up completely in a couple of moments. Let's go ahead. We have Raj and James, and then Mehmet. I cut you off earlier in the discussion. You can jump back in as part of this now. So, Raj, please go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Alan. I think third view, which is multipolarity, is an expression of change in material reality around the world since 1991. Okay, so unipolar power actually was challenged and actually shown as N pointed out when Russia took it on all this aggression and showed that this Western power can be defeated in the region of Russian neighborhood, which so I think it shows that balance of forces have shifted. There's no question about it, and it's a necessary intermediate stage. I don't think multipolarity is a lasting stage. It's a transitional stage. I think eventually it's going. Marxists should look at it. What Hegel, Marx, and then Lenin have pointed out, dialectically, there will be two poles of power. One, the imperialist pole, the other would be a pole which is not imperialist, but it is still capitalist mode of production, but run by a communist party in China. I think these were the two emerging poles. India would have to settle with one or the other. It's a major power, India now, okay, as the slide shown by Peter. It's a substantial economy. It's the largest number of people in any one country. So I think what we are seeing is a redivision of the world, as Lenin described, but a redivision that is going to take place preceding the onset of next set of socialist revolutions, which will transform the world. Because if it doesn't get transformed, we will become extinct. Human beings will become extinct with just simply the problem of ecology itself is a very dangerous thing going on. So and then all this warfare and working class not having enough to eat and sustain, like United States, 2/3. So the significant thing here is this is a shift that is taking place, geostrategic shift that has means it's leading towards a stage 2, which precedes the stage 3, which is the onset of socialist revolution. Thank you.
Okay, next. Let's see, James, and then Mehmet. James, go ahead.
So I want to just reinforce what Raj just said. I was thinking along the same lines. All these human crises and contradictions that we see over war and growth and control and state power, and I don't think these are the important crises. We've passed 7 of 9 planetary boundaries. This is going to change all the calculations that are going to have to be done as the real contradictions in humans' interactions with our environment. And this, I think, means that the way we kind of interpret what's going on politically in the world and through economic systems and are we going to get enough people employed and stuff like that are all going to have to give way to these much, much larger questions. It seems like in a way we're arguing about the house is on fire and who gets to hold the hose and who gets to control the faucet and who's going to get to play with, and who has to go get the hose. In fact, that's kind of the biggest one. Nobody's even going to go get the hose. The house is on fire and we're arguing over what. This is going to completely, I think, change all the calculations that go on how governments, and it's what's going to come out, I think, is that the governments that can deal with this rapid change in climate and how it affects their people. Those are the governments, and hopefully that's going to be a socialist kind of government, but it may not be. I mean, right now the most socialist countries are really a mixed socialist capitalist countries, and so it's not quite clear how they'll make those calculations. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
All right, thank you. Mehmet, please go ahead, unmute and make your comment.
Yeah, thank you. I think we are exaggerating few things here. Where the exaggeration goes is the rivalry between the imperialist countries. Like I said, the nation states of capitalists is eroding. That is for sure. It doesn't matter now if a finance capitalist is from South Africa or from Canada or from United States or from Russia. They can get together. We know these. But the paranoia of the leading imperialist, sure, there is. It has some. It will try to avoid others sitting at the table too. But where we are exaggerating is this rivalry between imperialists. Why am I saying this? Because even Lenin in his Imperialism writes that the imperialist rivalries will lead to wars. When is the last time we saw two imperialist countries having a war? Did we see United States waging a war against England? Are we waiting for Germany to start attacking Canada? No, it's not happening. Even the Monroe Doctrine, look at it. United States, it wasn't supposed to allow Europe to come in and play in its backyard, right? Well, look at what happened in Falkland Islands. Who was helping Britain to come to Americas and bomb the hell out of another country? It was the United States. So let's not exaggerate this rivalry. The reason why I'm saying is that there is a shift of the finance capitalists, the imperialists, to band together against the people of the world, against the working class of the world. So this is going to then end up, I don't think there's going to be a war between the imperialists, but if you call, somebody said that, well, the emerging countries like China and Russia, they are capitalists but not yet imperials, emerging imperials. Well, I'm sorry, but where does capitalism go when it develops? Like in Russia or China? Where will it go if not imperialism? They have to compete. They have to. Look at Africa. Yes, China makes a lot of positive contributions to Africa, but also you need to look at how the working conditions, around the Chinese plants in Africa are. Let's remember, when the United States wanted to take away the colonies of Britain, France, Germany, in Africa and other places, what did it use? What was the key word? Freedom. It was liberation. It was against colonialism. How many of them are really, really free now? Because they have been kept together under US imperialism with neocolonialism, with debt. So now the rising imperialism is also soft in the world. Yes, they compromise, they go slowly, they reach to Africa, but this is capitalism. And the rise of capitalism, you can't stop it. It has to reach out for imperialism. That's where, the rivalry between countries come in. But that is softening up because the Chinese capitalists work so well with the American capitalists. Russian capitalists were, beyond themselves when they were working together until they got kicked out. So let's not exaggerate that. And I think it's the whole salvation still is with the working class of the world doing their revolutions here and there. But I don't look at BRICS as a very, exciting thing happening. It's just one country is losing the leadership and many others like it are emerging. Thank you.
Lucy, followed by Peter. So Lucy, please go ahead.
Yeah, about that question, the emerging capitalist countries that can become imperialist. I'm not sure that China would meet that criteria because China does control its capitalist class. I don't believe that, well, I mean, my understanding is that capitalism in China is under strict control. And the Communist Party is controlling it. So whether China becomes imperialist or not, the one interesting thing about BRICS is that at least under the leadership of Xi, he came out with this proposal for global, what was it? Global governance. And so to me, what that means is that they're thinking is that they will have something like the United Nations uniting the different countries, but perhaps under some kind of democracy, but something along the lines of the United Nations. And so to me, that I think maybe the way forward for the countries to break away from capitalism. I don't know. I mean, I may be wrong, but I think that has to be. Rush said it that this period of time would probably be a transitional period. I mean, don't you think that's possible? I mean, I don't know.
Okay, Peter, please go ahead.
Thanks. So this is a discussion about how Marxists interpret this change, and we've heard all kinds of different perspectives. Of course, Marxists have never had a unitary view of the world, and this is a good example. And I just for my own amusement, I just checked a Marxist website called Workers' Voice, which is surprisingly quite active in DSA. They call themselves Marxists, and DSA is a so-called socialist organization.
Well,
yeah, I know, maybe not, but they propose. So Workers' Voice has been raising money to send to. Let me get this straight. I don't want to misquote this. They have been sending money to express our sincere solidarity with our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, donated money, technical and tactical equipment for union members serving in the military in Ukraine. So I mean, internationalism takes all kinds of different properties and different stripes. But what I really want to just bring up, Mehmet really raises some good questions. Is capital really national still? This is a great debate among not simply Marxists, but all international discussions, and Marxists particularly find this significant because if it doesn't matter where a finance capitalist comes from, then we as a working class, as Marxists, are really at war with all of capital, international, anywhere. It doesn't matter. It makes no difference. But really doesn't make no difference. Ask a capitalist from China who invested in Venezuela whether it doesn't matter where you're from. I would say absolutely. They found out in a major way that it matters where a capitalist is from, or a Russian oligarch who invested in chocolate, or who knows, mining in Ukraine. They are now bankrupt. They're now expropriated It absolutely matters where where a capitalist is from, who owns it in what country. And that's also true for Western powers. England can't go and just invest into uranium mining in French West Africa. The French would absolutely, expel them. So, this does matter where capital is from and the nationality of capital and where they repatriate the profits, et cetera. And there are real, you know, blocks of capitalists, not only national, they certainly, are include cross-national boundaries like in Europe, but still, it is important that Marxists are really precise about what is happening and uh, how this tipping point is really being evidenced today, and not be, we can't be paint with too broad a brush, I think is the point.
Okay. Next is Anne, followed by Richard F. So please, Anne, please go ahead. Let's try to limit our comments just because we're at the end of our time. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, it is true that capital has become, not just now, it's been for decades, become more internationally intertwined and connected. But it doesn't mean that they don't need the state. U.S. finance capital, that is U.S. imperialism, always needed the U.S. state. So the 700 or 800 bases around the world that somebody mentioned earlier are real, and they represent the U.S. state. Well, increasingly over the decades, the secret part of the state, so-called, that I don't use the term deep state because that's not a real thing, but there are agencies and apparati of the U.S. state that operate in other countries and operate in this country, even in socialist movements. But my point is more about how the U.S. state operates internationally. Increasingly, and I mean, they operated openly in NATO, but increasingly they've operated in the apparatus of the EU, in many of the European states. I mean, it's hard to imagine Kaya Kallas and Ursula von der Leyen and Rutte and Macron as representing some national form or even a Euro-wide form, other than on behalf of the U.S. state apparatus and U.S. finance capital. What is the objective there? Well, the objective, by the way, it also doesn't mean there are still not contradictions between French imperialism and U.S. imperialism, and that's been taking place in West Africa in particular, but other places. I think it's also true that people in the United States become overly enthusiastic, or what Stalin described as dizzy with success, even if there isn't success. So what I think that we need, Marxists in the United States, or Marxists in the world for that matter, but particularly in the United States, we need a theory of revolution for today. And this is not particular today. We've needed a new theory of revolution for some time. Most Marxists, or most communist Marxists in the United States, have basically relied on the decisions of the Seventh World Congress for 90 years now. And so people still think fascism is the threat. We have to unite against fascism before we can get to the other stage of the struggle. Well, the world is on the verge of world socialism. And once the U.S. state is removed, socialism will flow. Mm-hmm. The U.S. state is the big obstacle to the advance of all humanity and the saving of the planet, if that's on your agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Richard F.
Well, I'll just repeat what Anne said because he said what I was going to say. You know that you can't capital cannot separate itself from the state because, as somebody said once said, power comes from the barrel of a gun, and the capital cannot create its own barrel of a gun. It has to use the state. It has to use workers, recruit workers to fight for it. And without that, it ultimately has no power at all, no matter how much it creates currencies and cryptocurrencies and so forth. So I leave it there.
Okay, Dave, you want to go ahead?
Hi. Okay. I just want, again, short question that we agree that capitalist mode of production, it's evil. But question is, can this stage of development be skipped? And so that's a big question. I want to quote just a few lines from Marx's third volume from the Role of Credit. Here he says the credit system has accelerates the material development of the productive forces and the creation of the world market, which it is the historical task of the capitalist mode of production to bring to a certain level of development as material foundations for the new forms of production, that is a socialist form of production. And credit system is the finance system, is the credit system, he's saying. So what he's suggesting here is that the finance system, that's his historical task to help development of the materialist forces to a certain extent. And that's my question, that when people say that, well, capitalism is evil and capitalist development in India and South America and Africa, why bother when we know that this is the evil mode of production? Then what is the option they are suggesting?
Yeah, I think what you're actually commenting on what other people have said, which is that well, I think you are commenting on the question. So let's go with Richard Wright. Uh, please go ahead.
Oh, geez, it's open. Uh, yeah, I think to me that one of the problems is that Marxist revolutionaries, if you will, think that just because you have a revolution that you're instantly going to eradicate all forms of social means of production, put it in the old Marxist terminology. And at least from personally, I don't agree with that proposition. I think that, well, even for example, in Russia, even though they had a political revolution, they still had to deal with the private ownership of agricultural lands, and they had, you know, there were White Russians and Red Russians in that perspective. I mean, there's a whole movie made about this. And I think the same thing's true in China, that they had to deal with landowning and private property and literally capitalist production. So that's why I don't think that just because you have a revolution, you're going to instantly eradicate capitalism. I subscribe to the theory of interpenetrating modes of production. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, at the risk of we're pretty much at the end here. At the risk of sort of blowing this wide open, I want to make a couple of comments about some of the things that we've heard to try to sharpen this just a bit. Um, if you really look at what I described as the first trend, which are the people that view this as two competing blocks, multipolarity has no significance, two competing imperialist blocks. One of the things that I see that folks are putting forward, comrades are putting forward in this trend is they're saying that Russia's war, the war in Ukraine is a revanchist war uh, on the part of Russia, that Russia is basically out to conquer Ukraine for its resources. It's pretty consistent in that group that these people hold that view, whereas the opposite view is that Russia is defending itself and protecting its sovereignty. Another thing to say is that how do we look at what happened in Libya, what happened in Yugoslavia, what is attempting to happen in Venezuela, the question of sovereignty and whether that's important or not. And if you look at the folks that sort of the two competing imperialist blocs or the two competing capitalist blocs, they always say, well, we're against the United States intervention attacks on Venezuela, but we're against the Maduro government because the Maduro government is not a Marxist-Leninist government with a communist party advocating for the dictatorship of the proletariat. And to me, that is really an opportunistic perspective that really, in a sense, amplifies the imperialist perspective. That being said, there is room for saying, look, whether you agree, if you don't agree that the Bolivarian Revolution is a strategic path or multipolarity is a strategic path to liberation, then that's a perfectly legitimate. But the question right now is, what is the U.S. going to succeed in overthrowing the Maduro government? And does that make a difference or not? And I think ultimately these people are saying that it makes no difference. And they've lost the lessons of Libya, they've lost the lessons of Yugoslavia, etc. So anyway, I think it's time to wrap up. I'll take advantage of my position here and have the last word. Happy holidays to everybody. No program next week. Come back on January 4th. Actually, Jack Rasmus follows the economics of what's going on pretty closely, and I think he'll have a lot of interesting things to say about what's taking place in the economy. So happy holidays, and we'll see you guys on January 4th. Sign up, make an end of year donation. I know NPR wants your money, USAID wants your money. Why not give us a donation to the Sunday Morning Marxist Forum so that we can continue these programs? So happy holidays, and we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much, everybody.
Alan, we didn't get to the third point about the working class in our session.
It's true.
They don't count. What counts is 6. I had another thing to say.
All right.
Those are not our holidays. Those are our owners' holidays.
Okay.
Buy now.
Okay. Sorry about
now.
that. What I want to say is let's do a program. Let's do a program specifically on that topic, Raj. I think we have to do a separate program.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good
My
point.
holiday is in July.
Good point. Okay. All right. We'll see you guys.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Stop the recording.
Stop the recording. Okay.
Bye-bye.